Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Sock Size School. Today's going to be a psychology focused video discussing the different types of essay structure in A-level psychology. Now we have dropped the AS. The full length essay you could be asked to write would be a 16-mark question. So we're going to discuss the three different types of 16-mark question you can see in the A-level papers. This is something that students often get a little bit confused at, particularly if they take sociology and psychology and the essay skills overlap a little bit. So I hope this video is going to clear up some confusion that currently exists. So the first thing before we go any further is to just remind ourselves of the different assessment objectives in psychology. And what assessment objectives mean are the skills you are being asked to show in the exam. So you have AO1, which is referred to as knowledge and understanding, which you get by showing key terms, studies, concepts, theories, and describing them and explaining them in questions. You also have AO2, which is the skill of application, and often in psychology, this involves you linking things to a STEM or a scenario, or linking different parts of psychology together, or linking to common sense situations. But it means that you're applying the skills that you've learnt in the A-level course to something that you have not seen before, so unseen material. And then AO3 is a skill of analysis and evaluation, which often, in simplification, requires you to talk about strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. But normally in an essay, you're having to evaluate what you've mentioned in AO1. And you can do that by using things like Scout, Grave, issues and debates, which we can shorten to Grenade to help you to remember that. But there are all sorts of other ways you can evaluate, which the textbook helps you to do, often on the second page of the double page spread. Now, just before we go any further, I just want to remind you of different paragraph structures. Now, this may be a little bit different to what you've done in lesson because I'm trying to make this even clearer than I have before about how you answer an essay. So when you're using AO1, when you're demonstrating the skill of knowledge and understanding, you need to use P paragraphs. So you make your point, you provide some evidence, and then you provide some elaboration. So if you had an essay that was talking about social learning theory, you'd make your point about mediational processes. You'd then go on and give some examples of mediational processes. And then what you might do is go on and elaborate, so link about the idea of how if an individual is going to imitate a behaviour, and there needs to be some element of vicarious reinforcement and the processes of attention, motivation and reproduction that are essential to that vicarious reinforcement by elaborating on some further details of knowledge that you have. So that's how you show AO1 in an essay. It would similarly be used if you were using a study. So you'd be, one research study could be Zimbardo's prison experiment, for example, and then you go on to give details of the prison experiment. This showed that people would conform to their social role. That's what I mean by elaboration. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, sometimes you're asked to link to a STEM. And that means you've given a scenario. Often they're quite funny names. You'll remember one with Steph and Jeff potentially in social influence. But you're given a scenario, and what you have to do is in your writing, link your knowledge. So that paragraph structure is pretty much the same, but you link your knowledge by linking it to the STEM, by showing application. So you would say, this is this, this can be seen in the STEM by, or this links to the STEM by. And you only use Peel if you've been given a STEM and you've got the AO2 assessment objective that's being assessed, which is not always the case. Then for evaluation, we use PESH, which is obviously different to P and Peel. PESH is only used for AO3, and this is often the thing that students are getting wrong. They're just using PESH, and actually that means you're only using the evaluation section. You're only getting marks for AO3. So you need to get in your head that we're using different paragraph structures for different assessment objectives. Now in PESH, you make your point saying one strength and one weakness is, you then go on and provide evidence for that point. You then go on and say, so what, why is this important, using these phrases like this means that, this shows that, etc. Now it's those things that often get missed in essays, but they're really important. And then for the higher level skill, just writing a PES paragraph is fine to evaluate, but if you're trying to push into the higher grades, which all of you should be, then you need to provide potentially a counter argument, which contradicts what you've already said. So if you've made a comment about as a strength, you then provide a weakness as your however point. Now, all full-length essays in A-level psychology will be worth 16 marks, which is an increase on the amount of marks that you're given at AS, which is 12 marks. But there are two types. You can have 16 markers with a STEM that will either have describe and evaluate or discuss, or a 16 marker with a STEM, which has got this scenario, and then you have a question down here that links. You have to refer to the conversation or refer to the scenario. So I'm going to talk you through how to structure those 3 essays using the paragraph structure I've mentioned just now. Just as a reminder, these are the amount of marks you get for the different assessment objectives. Now, whilst the essays are marked holistically, and what that means is they look at all the different things that you've done to try and decide what mark band you should be in, you get 6 marks for AO1 officially in the 16 marker without a STEM, and 10 marks for AO3. So your essay needs to be more heavily weighted on the evaluation and the discussion than it does on the AO1. But in an essay with a STEM, you get 6 marks for AO1, just showing your knowledge, 4 marks for application, so linking it to the scenario, and then 6 marks again for AO3. So less evaluation required because you've got that skill of application that you're showing. So we're going to start off looking at the structures of 16 marks without stems. So we're going to start off with an essay that's describe and evaluate. Sometimes it's outline and evaluate, sometimes it's describe and evaluate, but they sort of mean the same thing. And this is the kind of structure we're looking for. We're looking for PPP to show off your knowledge of the description, then PESH, 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 and sometimes to push yourself even one more PESH. If you haven't used PESH and you've just used PES for evaluation, it'd be better off to provide 4 PES points if you haven't used PESH. Okay, so we are going to look at the question of describe and evaluate the multi-store model of memory. So the assessment objectives that we can see here, we know we've got 6 marks for the description for AO1, 10 marks for the evaluation. So this is what the structure would look like. In order to show off your AO1 knowledge, you need to be providing 3 PEE points, P points. I'll talk you through what I would put in the specific boxes, the specific paragraphs in a second. But once you've given that outline through PPP, you then go for your AO3, PESH, 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 and perhaps PESH. So the structure for a 16 marker that is describe and evaluate or outline and evaluate is PPP, PESH, 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 PESH. In reality, it's more likely to be PP, PESH, 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 because you'll run out of time potentially if you write in lots of detail. But it needs to follow this kind of structure. And if I was writing this essay, this is what I'd go about. So my first paragraph would be talking about the sensory register. I'd then go on to talk about how that links to short-term memory, and I'd then go on to talk about how that links to long-term memory. Bearing in mind I've only got 6 marks available, I get to the key points. I talk about the structure of the multi-store model, I talk about the different features, but I get to the point. I don't have time to add lots and lots of detail. And then in AO3, I'd use things like providing evidence to support the model, evidence to reject the model, questioning its simplicity and potentially comparing it to the working memory model, and then the methodological issues there are with testing it. So often the multi-store model is tested in a lab, which lacks validity, etc. That would be the essay structure. It would go all of the AO1 and then all of the AO3. Let's look at the other side of discuss. Now, a lot of people use the same structure for describe and evaluate for discuss, which is absolutely fine. But to make this a little bit more sophisticated and to show off, what you can do is jump around a bit and go AO1, AO3, AO1, AO3, AO1, AO3. Because sometimes in a discussion it makes more sense to do that, to have a point and then discuss it, and then have a point and then discuss it. So it's up to you if you want to stick with the describe and evaluate structure for a discuss question or mix it up a bit. We're going to look at discuss the behaviourist approach to treating phobias. So AO1, AO3, they're still the same assessment objectives that we're showing. We still have 6 marks available for AO1 and we still have 10 marks available for AO3. But this is how it could be structured differently. You give your knowledge, your PEE, and then instantly you evaluate that. And then you give your knowledge PEE, and then you go on to evaluate what you've just said. And then you do it again, and then you go on to evaluate what you've just said. And you may then also provide an additional evaluation point, depending on whether you've used PES or PESH. So in an essay on behaviourism and depression, you'd outline the principles of behaviourist treatment, talking about the two-process model with classical conditioning, operant conditioning. Sorry, this has gone in slightly the wrong order. Then what you would do is jump over here and talk about the fact that that's reductionist. Then what you might go on to do is discuss flooding, and then directly critiquing flooding, you would say that maybe flooding is not applicable or appropriate for all phobias. Then what you go on to do is outline and describe systematic desensitisation, and then you could go on to talk about the fact that it's more time consuming than flooding. You could go on to provide evidence to support. But what that does is that jumps between, it goes AO1 for a paragraph, AO3 for a paragraph, AO1 for a paragraph, AO3 for a paragraph, AO1, then AO3. So it would go P-PESH, 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 PESH, for example. Now, the final type of question that you can be asked at A-level are 16-mark questions with a STEM. So here's the example. Now, it follows a very similar pattern to the question of describe and evaluate. You just have an additional skill of application to show. So it would go P-L, and the L is where you link it to the STEM. P-L is where you link it to the STEM, so it's peel. So you have AO1, AO2, AO1, AO2, AO3, AO3, AO3. So this question is asking us to discuss learning theory of Bowlby's monotropic theory of attachment. So what we do here is we've got AO1, but we've also got to show AO2, which is different to the two previous essays I've shown you, and then AO3. So the peel paragraph is broken up into this stuff shows AO1, the PEE shows AO1. You then directly link your P to your L. So what you've described, you then link it to the STEM to show the skill of application. You then do that again with the other part of the essay. So P and then the L to link it to the STEM. And then you go PESH, PESH, PESH. Now you need to do less evaluation because obviously you've got some marks that are available for application instead. So for this essay, I'd outline learning theory. I'd then link it to the STEM because we know learning theory is about attachment being based on food, so I'd link that to breastfeeding. Then outline Bowlby, which is the idea of ask me, so it's adaptive social releases, critical period, monotropy, internal working model, and then I then link that specifically to the bit where it talks about mother's love being special, talking about monotropy and adaptation. And then I could go and say that there are issues with animal evidence, particularly linked to learning theory. Bowlby's research associates sensitive puts a lot of pressure on mothers or blame on mothers if attachment doesn't develop, ignores the role of the father. You could then talk about how both of these theories oversimplify attachment, and therefore it might be better to use learning theory alongside Bowlby's theory to fully explain the attachment process. But what happens here then is you go peel, peel, PESH, PESH, PESH. Now you could be even more sophisticated with this and say go peel and then PESH, the paragraph that's relevant to learning theory, which is the issue and animal issues, and then peel, PESH, and then only evaluate the thing that's relevant to Bowlby, and then end in an evaluation paragraph that maybe applies to both. But you need to be not confusing yourself, so sometimes it's easier to just split it into those individual assessment objectives. So now it's over to you. Please pause the video and have a go at using this video to help you plan a structure or even write an answer to these three questions. So I hope you find that video useful, and I hope that clarifies the different structure available for all the different questions, the essay questions in A-level psychology. If you need any more help with this, please do contact me, but sometimes it's better potentially to use these essay plans that I've given you here and then have a go at writing the answers to get in your head how those structures are different. Thanks guys. Any more recommendations of videos that you'd like me to make, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to help. Bye!